Good morning. If you could join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our continuing series of hearings on the bail reform issue. Yesterday, we heard a lot of information. There's a lot to take in that we're still going to be processing. Today, we're going to take up a little bit less complicated, or actually, we'll see, the issue of paying bail commissioners and making sure that they are compensated appropriately for their time, equipment, and things of that nature. With that, we heard from bail commissioners yesterday, so I think we have a pretty good idea. We heard one person was owed $50-something thousand from the state in just over a period of 2 years. Obviously, that's unacceptable. We ask a lot of these folks. They're volunteers, and we understand the spirit of the volunteerism in New Hampshire. As all of us know, we are also volunteers. But no one's asking us to supply our own equipment, our own paper, our own vehicles and mileage. We get paid for mileage. It seems ridiculous that some people who appear to be, for the most part, retirees, are expected to use their small pay to not only support us with their time, but also their vehicles. That the gas prices just keep going up. It's just unconscionable in my mind the way that they have been treated, especially in light of how important they are to the system. Without them, it would literally come to a screeching halt. So I'll open the floor for discussion. If anyone would like to speak on the topic or has any ideas or thoughts, I'll let you guys have at it first. Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just coincidentally, last evening, I happened to be talking with a police chief in one of my towns, and he was telling me that in Cheshire County, the best of his knowledge, there is only one bail commissioner at this point. The other four are permanently unavailable due to not being paid the $40 that is required. So one bail commissioner for entire county, I think, is a stretch. His suggestion was putting it somehow into the court fees.
Indeed. And my concern is even that, I think we need a timeline. Most people in this state, when you perform services or work, you're expected to be paid within 2 weeks of that work performed, especially when you have your own financial outlays to be reimbursed. So I think we need to look at the amount, we need to look at the time they're paid, and the source of the funding. Anyone else? Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps it might be something to look into if we would consider billing per bail, and the state would actually pay per bail, and then they'd be reimbursed by either similar to cost containment, but I know that we've discussed that cost containment may not be the proper entity for collection, but including the court fees, that basically the state would pay the bail commissioners per bail, and then the state would recover the funds.
I think that is an excellent road to start going down. I believe that the court has the ability to order someone to pay, whereas the bail commissioner does not. So if the court pays the money up front, it's the court's money to get back. And I feel like they'd be more motivated to get their own money back than to get money back for someone else. So I think that that's a good starting point as far as in the bill that we draft, that we put in there that the bail commissioners will be paid by the court per bail. And I would suggest that we put a 2-week time limit for that to be processed, depending on when they're submitted. And then we order the court to collect it as they see fit based on the indigency or not of the defendant. that's their determination to make if they feel like they can get their money back or not. We will, of course, have to put some seed money in that to give the courts time to request it in their budget going forward. So we'll have to discuss, one, how much to ask for, and going forward, how that structure would look. Representative Muse, did you have something? I thought you saw you raise your hand.
It's interesting after having sat through these hearings on bail commissioners for all three of my terms. One of the things that strikes me is just how unusual the situation is with bail commissioner pay. It would be like asking policemen to collect a fine from the people they arrest. So, and that would be the way that we actually pay police salaries. So, I mean, if you extrapolate the way that we handle bail commissioner pay, and you sort of transport that over to roles that may be more familiar to us, I think most people would pretty quickly come to the conclusion that it really makes absolutely no sense, and that we do need a much better way. If we're going to retain the bail commissioner system, we need a way of making sure that people are paid for the service that they render. They're paid consistently, they're paid fairly. And even in a situation where people are getting paid 100% of the time, which is not the situation now, we are still saving an incredible amount of money as a state by having this system. And the longer that we let this situation fester, and it's been festering for at least the 5 years so far that I've been in the legislature, the longer that we let this whole situation fester, we're going to have fewer and fewer experienced bail commissioners. And at some point, the whole thing just starts to crash. And we really will have no choice but to look at another system. So at this point, we do have a choice, and I think it does start with making sure that these folks are paid fairly and consistently.
I agree wholeheartedly. Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a follow-up to Representative Stone's suggestion, which would be there are several bail commissioners right now that are out thousands of dollars. And when we go forward with this initiative, whatever it is that we, come up with today or over the next several weeks, I think something we need to address is, are we moving forward from here? As in, it's still up to that bail commissioner to do what they need to do for the pay that they're owed, or are we looking at somehow trying to make right the wrongs that have been done over the last several years? I think that's something that obviously is going to be a conversation. So I think we need to be proactive with how we're going to handle it.
I think that best case scenario, we would include in whatever funding we request an amount to reimburse outstanding debts to the bail commissioners and have them start with a clean slate if possible. But right now, what I think I'm going to need is, and perhaps Representative Sytek can help, we need a kind of a number, like, in other words, does anyone know exactly how many bail commissioners we have? And then about how many bails? I mean, and because we have no IT system, it's kind of impossible to come up with that number, but we have to come up with a number to ask for to be able to pay the bail commissioners. Any input on that, Representative Sytek?
Almost none. I don't want to say things I don't know, because I only know Salem, Pelham, Windham, and our dynamic. So we're unusual in that we're close geographically. So I don't spend a trip to one of these places is basically takes $5 off of my bail. Not because you really had to get there. You didn't walk. And we have a very good system, high rate of return. 2 out of 10 is maybe it's 1 out of 10, because we also get checks semi-periodically from the court. And by the way, I might add, where is the court? Maybe they're watching, but you'd think they'd be here to have an oar in this water. Okay, so I wish I could tell you more. I think my sense is, I'm speaking for me, I don't know what Mr. Leary might want to say, but going forward, correcting the situation, I don't think anybody's looking for anything else but get this straightened out. If I may, because I don't want to talk much, but I do want to throw this in because we're looking at the overall bail situation. And the Roman censor Cato ended every speech, no matter what it was about, with Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. And I want to end everything I talk about with, we need a training program. Or I'm talking with Mr. Leary about how he handles it, we handle it. District court tells us something in October, another district court tells us something else. It's like a golf course with local ground rules. Well, wait a minute, this is a system of justice. I'm not comfortable with that. Look, when I'm a bail commissioner, I follow the rules. I don't follow how I might vote in the House or what my personal preference is. I represent a system, and everybody is Mister. Every one of them, as far as I'm concerned, is guilty. Who cares? I represent a system, and they're treated. I tell them, I gotta stop here. You've showed up. You're acting like a business. We treat you like a business. May not be a business you want to be in, but please keep up the good work. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your input. Sir, would you like to maybe address the issue of the number of bail commissioners? How many are in your area, Representative Satek?
We have 4 in our area. One is semi-active, 3 actives. Okay.
Do you have any concept or idea of how many the state we have as a?
I've heard from people more involved. By the way, amazing. You know Trixie Lefebvre that's been
Yeah.
here. I'm on the condo board with a relative of hers through marriage. I was at a meeting last night. I'm trying to talk him into a bail commissioner because they need one in either for her, and I'm trying to talk her back into it, or for the Londonderry, Manchester area. So I think Mr. Leary can probably tell you more than I can about that. I'm kind of insular.
Okay.
I know what I know, but I don't know more than I know.
Gotcha. Sir, would you approach the mic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is Paul Leary. I'm a bail commissioner appointed out of Franklin Court, and I am the only one appointed out of the Franklin Court. However, we have several from the Laconia District Court that cover, as well as a couple out of the Concord Court. Pre-COVID, we had approximately 120 bail commissioners, is what I was told. Post-COVID, the first round, it was down to 100. And currently from the scuttlebutt, we're hearing it's about 85 now. And people are doing what's called the quiet retiring, when either their Justice of the Peace Commission expires or their bail commissioners expires. They just don't renew it and they just disappear. And sometimes people move and the court's not aware of that until if they have to have an annual meeting and then we happen to be talking, oh no, they went to Florida 2 years ago. So the thing is, that's why we're figuring about 85, and that's still plus or minus.
With regard to, you've heard what we're talking about, trying to come up with an amount to seed this program of making the courts have to pay. Do you have any concept of how many bails are conducted per year? And I know it's
See, the court system will be able to tell you that because they record all of that stuff because they have to.
but it's individual courts. There's no, I don't
Well,
think there's
I'm
a,
sure the courts have, because they have the administrative office of the courts. I would hope in this day and age that they would be reporting monthly their activity to the court, so they'd have the totals.
where did the checks come out of?
I didn't say.
The checks that you get, where do they come out of?
I don't know. They come in an envelope from the state of New Hampshire. It's like
oh.
they don't come very often.
No, I'm just trying to
I said
figure
that-
someone I can call and say, could you tell me how many bails you've done in the last year?
I said that in jest at my last training in Laconia, which was the best one in 7 years. And all of a sudden, in the next 2 weeks, I got like 8 or 9 checks from the court, and then it was crickets for a long time.
Well, perhaps this will generate a few more checks.
But here's the problem. Again, I told you yesterday where we fall in the scope
Yeah.
of things. We understand that. But the bail commissioner's fee is tagged on after everything goes to the court. So the very last payment that the defendant makes, whether it happened to be 6 months, a year, 5 years, or 10 years, then we get our check.
Yeah.
We need to be at the front end.
Yeah.
But I think our representative over there was headed in the correct direction. But don't limit it to every 2 weeks. It's just whatever the bail commissioners put in a 2-week period, they report it for the next period and we get paid.
Yeah, and that's
That
what I
kind of a
meant by
thing.
that.
But and I'm speaking just on my behalf, not anyone else, it would be ridiculous to think at this point, because some of us, I've only been doing it 7.5 years, and I showed you I'm at over 51,000. But since I typed that up, I've done about 7 bails, and I've only been paid for 1 out of the 7. So that number's gone up.
It's like the deficit clock. That's
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And if you want to make this happen in a reality, we're trying to take care of today and the future. Unfortunately, it's the past. And when I came on, Judge Gordon told me I'd be paid for 3 out of 5. That's 60%. I told you I've been collecting 62 to 68%. So what he told me back in March of 2016 has held true. So the thing is, I knew that when I came into it.
Mhm.
Would I like that? Absolutely. Would my wife like it even better? Absolutely. But I considered it a hobby in a way. So the thing is, that's from my standpoint. But let's fix it for today and going forward. Then later on, if someone wins the lotto and gives it to the state to pay off all the bail commissioners, we'll gladly take it. But let's fix it for today and go forward to the future.
Well, I like to aim high and see where we end up.
Oh, absolutely.
So here's the problem, and I hope everyone's listening. So even if I were to be able to call and say, okay, so how many bails did you pay for? That doesn't tell us how many bails were actually done because they're not paying for all the bails. So I'm trying to see if there's a way, and I'm going to Representative Sytek's point, I'm going to have to call the court and see if there's a way for them to figure out how many bails were done last year in total.
Well,
And I suspect they won't be able to tell me.
I think they may, because say like the electronic bench warrants. I go and I do one defendant. Like I told you, the one I had, he had 9 electronic bench warrants. There were 7 different courts, but each one of those 9, because they were an electronic bench warrant, required a bond, the what you need to know form, 2 more pages, and the circuit court bail order form. So there were 5 pages for each one. So 45 pages of paperwork, 7 envelopes, 7 stamps. And if it went over 4 pages, you needed the 5th stamp on that. Just to give you an idea of cost, time spent was about 5, maybe 6 hours total time between going there, coming that, and finishing up, addressing all the envelopes. And then, of course, that doesn't count going to the post office, dropping them off, going to the bank, making the deposits, writing the checks. Again, we have to pay for our own checks to write to the court too. So yeah, it's a lot of cost involved, but we're only allowed to collect 1 bail per call. Doesn't matter how much we have to do or how long we're there.
So if you get one call to one city and there's 6 defendants to be bailed, you would be able to bill for all of them, correct?
That's a different story. Matter of fact, had that happened the other night. 5 young gentlemen out partying, all under the age of 21. So that was one of those gold mines. So
Yeah.
it doesn't happen very often. They all had the money, and it was like, that was a surprise too. And it was one of those things.
Christmas came early.
1:30 in the morning. So the thing is, it does happen. And since starting to take credit cards, that helped a lot, especially doing the remote bailing. Because I'll be honest, I've got to go over to Bradford. I've got 5 envelopes over there I got to pick up. I've got 3 in Whitefield. I've got 1 down somewhere in Rockingham County in the middle of nowhere, not easy to get to. It's been there for 3 years. I'll get there eventually. But it's not that, and that's one of the biggest problems about remote bailing. But the worst part is if it's a cash bail, that's like Plymouth won't hold the money in dispatch even until the next morning to come up and get it. Then I just don't go. It's like, I don't want to be driving at night in really bad weather. because I'm reaching that age where I probably shouldn't be, and you got to understand that and know it. So it's like, it's not that I don't want to do it, but it's like, hey, guys, you got to work with me halfway. You want me to do it, I'll do it. Hang on to the money, and I'll come up. But they're worried about it. Put it in a gun locker, take the key out, and
Yeah, it seems we heard that yesterday that bail money that isn't for the bail commissioner's fee seems to be being treated like a hot potato. Nobody wants to hold it or take it.
well, you can understand in this day and age, because the thing is, if it disappears, who's liable for it or
Yeah.
responsible for it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same with the jails. Like the jails we have to go out to. Merrimack County Jail, the round trip is 16.6 miles. It's doable in any kind of weather, except when the trees come down across the road. That just makes it a little difficult.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thank you. Anyone have a question? Representative Stone.
I'm not sure if you have the information on this or not, but one of the things we're seeing in a lot of other avenues is the lack of volunteers in certain age groups. Do we have any bail commissioners that you're aware of that are actually under the age of 50?
to the best of my knowledge and belief at this juncture of time, I would say in the negative, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you.
Was that evasive enough?
That is.
It was enough to say that probably not. So again, though, but the nature of this job is difficult for someone who has a full-time job and a family or, pets. It's just, it would be very difficult. So I can understand the age group, but at the same time, that's incentives me more that we're taking advantage of them. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I
sir.
could just inject on that. When I first came on, there was a young lady, she was probably in her 40s, who trained me. And she was happy I came on. She says, you can take care of the evening and the nights. I'll take care of the days, because of where her job fell. That worked out well. So the thing is, there are some people out there that are willing to do, like school shift type things. And in this day and age, I'm sure the court system would be willing to take someone if they had 6 or 8 hours a day that they could give, because the thing is, the system is stretched. And I told you I bailed 9 counties. The one county I don't have, and I'm not interested to jump into it, is Cheshire County, for the reason, the fact that is they only have one.
yeah, and that's kind of a hike.
Well, yeah, to
coast
go
of
make
Vermont Bar,
collections.
doesn't it? Okay. To your best of your knowledge, or you represent SciTech, how long has the fee been $40?
Since 2008.
2008?
That was in your report of 2019.
Okay. How does the committee feel about increasing that to 50? I mean, a $10 increase over that number of years with the, and I know Representative SciTech's probably about to say, no, let's just stay with the 40, but go ahead.
I'll say that, but what we'd prefer, I think, isn't an increase, but I think they would prefer, because I'm lucky.
Just to be paid at all.
By the way, Salem does shifts.
Mhm.
That's how we handle it. That's so 1 week is destroyed. You are 24/7 for 1 week, then you're off. I think we would appreciate the assurance of the $40, not 50 chancy.
As I said, I believe that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I think that it's a sad state of affairs that you have to settle for something less than would be appropriate just so that you have something at all. So I would like, if the committee agrees, to try and shoot for $50. I mean, we still have to negotiate with the Senate, but I'd like to start a little high so that if we do end up back at the 40, at least we haven't lost ground. Yeah. Representative Stone.
Thank you. I would support the $50. I think that'd be a much easier revenue source to go with than to do mileage, where if you included mileage, it'd be a more problematic and more comprehensive staff time
To
and
process
document
it.
time and reporting time. I think a straight 50 would be keeping it very clean and should be a little more palatable for the other entities that are involved in this.
I was thinking the same way, because mileage, I think that they should get mileage, but to your point, that requires court staff processing. And so everything we do is throwing a pebble in a pond, and the ripples go out. Representative SciTech.
I have customers from both jurisdictions from Massachusetts and from New Hampshire, so I've done some comparison shopping.
Hmm.
You should be aware Massachusetts charges 40.
Hmm.
And so I don't know that we care about what they do, but that's a point of reference. The other thing is, it's done by the clerk of court
Yes.
in Massachusetts, and many, I don't want to exaggerate, I've heard several times my customers, my clients, my restees thank me for the promptness by which we get there. They said, we had to wait 8 hours in Massachusetts, so.
Yeah,
for
it's
bail
done by
co-
the clerks, and they do have bail commissioners. But the clerk of courts in the local town usually handles it, and you do have to wait for a bail commissioner if the clerk does not want to get out of bed. So there's that. And I'm not sure, the clerk of courts is salaried anyway, quite handsomely in Massachusetts, I may add. So I don't know if they get that $40 on top of that, or if it goes to some victim witness, who knows? Sir, go ahead, Representative Meese.
Yeah, one of the things that we've also heard in some of the other sessions, and this is from the court system, was just the unusual status of bail commissioners. They're not employees of the court system. They're not really contractors of the court system. They're volunteers who, for the most part, are inconsistently trained. I know a few years ago in the commission that we had on bail commissioner pay, one of our recommendations was to try to professionalize it a little bit by making sure that bail commissioners at least got ID cards, state ID cards. And one of the things that we heard yesterday was somehow that got translated into a computer printout with a little tiny picture at the top that these folks are supposed to drag along in their wallets. Yeah, so
It looks probably like a hunting license.
part of it is, I think one of the things that just always strikes me about these hearings is how critical the role is, and what a critical role they play in the criminal justice system. But there just seems to have been a continuing refusal on the part of the court system to really do much of anything to professionalize the role. And I think these are people who really regard themselves as being professionals, and they take care of, a lot of that kind of activity themselves. I think, the vast majority are very responsible people. But the fact that they're essentially treated like the poor stepchildren of the judicial system doesn't really serve the people of New Hampshire or them very well, given the kind of sacrifices they make to do the job. So, the bottom line is, if we're going to have a system that depends on folks like this, those folks need to be able to depend on the system to at least make sure they get paid, they get properly trained, and that there are professional standards that they can comply with and shoot to aim for. And I don't see, I was in business for a long time. I don't see how you recruit anybody to a role where they're inconsistently paid, where, not only is it a situation where they may or not get paid, there's a certain amount of personal risk involved in driving to these locations at night through snowstorms and things like that. When they get there, they find that the handbook that's supposed to be their Bible hasn't been updated since 2019. And I think one of the things you were saying is the 2019 version isn't accessible on the website, or the 2020 version. So this is just really inexcusable, and it's just something we need to fix.
Agreed. And I don't want to, just like I said yesterday, I didn't want bail commissioners to feel like they needed to be defensive. I would like to extend the same thing to the court. I spoke to the new liaison to the legislature a week ago. She's also the general counsel, and she's very open to all of this. And right now I'm working on setting up a meeting with the Chief Justice, who's open to the meeting. So I feel like, we have a little bit of a different court system we're dealing with, just like we're a different legislature with the new Chief Justice is kind of taking over and wrapping his arms around everything. So this is the perfect time, I think. So I believe we'll be able to address these issues, and the court will hear them with an open mind. And what we want to do, and it's difficult for the court to be here because they have to stay out of policy. It would be great if they were here as a resource to give us information, but I feel like we're getting all we need directly from the source on this matter, and we'll bring that to the courts with our proposals. I think what's important, what we need to do is go to the court and say, this is what we're thinking. Is this workable? And if not, why not? And how much do you need? Sir, go ahead.
Just to answer something that Representative Muse brought up, is when came on, we were told we were not employees,
Yes.
that we are independent contractors, and we receive a 1099 at the end of the year. We are officers of the court, inferior, but we are officers of the court, just as a justice of the peace is, and that's even further down the line.
Yes.
So the thing
And,
is,
and that's one of the benefits of having you, because we don't have to pay you benefits. We don't have to. So that's the reason that the 1099 and the contractor. That being said, there's no reason that we can't give our contractors what they need to do the job that we are contracting them to do.
Okay.
So I think we
I have something to add.
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Representative
We
Pratt.
talked earlier about swearing him in. I don't think that would go against anything not being part of the system if we could swear him in. And also along with that, a simple laminated ID, because they're going into police stations and sensitive parts of the buildings and courts and everything else. They ought to have a little driver's license type ID that they can wear around their neck to show that they're part of the system and not part of the problem.
Agreed. Let's take just a quick informal vote. $50, is everyone okay for shooting for $50? Yeah, absolutely, Representative Reed.
Thank you for taking my question. If they get $50 an hour and they're putting in like 6 hours, they're getting like $8. And can we do better than?
I
50?
would rather not try to do better. I agree, but we have to look at what, first of all, how much is the court going to be able to get back? First, with a large percentage of the defendants being indigent, the courts aren't going to be able to get that money back. So it's going to end up being funded out of a general fund every year in a budget. So we have to really be careful with that. I think if we could get 50, we can come back later. Let's get a beachhead, and
Thank
once
you.
we take the beachhead, we can advance. So I think 50 is as you heard from Representative Tytech, he's nervous that might be a bridge too far, but we're going to start with that. But your point is well taken. So we have an informal agreement on shooting for 50. To Representative Pratt's point, do we have an agreement on directing the court to make enter into an agreement with the DMV to provide identification? Everyone agree? IDs. Also, do we have an agreement on doing whatever we need to make sure that they are sworn such that they are able to access FBI criminal justice information? Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If my memory serves me correctly, I think that's more of an issue, not being sworn, but completing the required training to be certified.
Now, I think there's probably a couple of things. Do we agree that we need to do whatever we need to do to ensure that they have access to criminal justice information?
Yes.
Does everyone agree to that? CJIS information. That would probably be one of the justices if they had to be sworn.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't all bail commissioners have to be justice of the peace?
yes.
So they're
They're
in
sworn.
essence,
Yeah.
yeah.
In other words, we fill out 2 applications. One is a justice of the peace, one to be a bail commissioner. We have to go get 4 people to sign off that we're reputable
Upstanding
people.
citizens.
We have the state police background check, so we're basically twice in the 5-year period of our appointment. A background check has been done. 'Cause
Do you
my-
have to take an oath of office of any kind?
Yeah, I have to sign off, especially as a justice of the peace. The bail commissioner is more based on the fact to be a bail commissioner, you have to be a justice of the peace, so we're already sworn.
Okay. Okay.
But the thing is, to CJIS, this is where you have to be careful.
Yeah.
This is the federal government.
Right. Which
And
is,
it has to do with peace officers. Basically, in other words, you're a police, you're in the executive branch, we're in the judicial branch. However, in CJIS, bail commissioners are allowed to review. I can't possess.
Mhm.
They can't send me an email or a fax or any of that because I don't meet the criteria. But because of the job functionality I do, I'm allowed to review it.
okay, we're gonna look into that and see if there's. I know probation's allowed to see and hold and have.
But they're sworn and they have, I believe, the power of arrest because they can take people into custody.
It is a good point. Okay, so for the committee, I'm going to look into seeing what level, if possible, that they would be able to access criminal records on their own from a secure terminal of some type. So we're going to put a pin in that. Also, with regard to that, I would propose that we ask for a limited number of amount of money to onboard these folks. When they come aboard, you know, they have to have, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, you need a cell phone. You need some type of a laptop, iPad, something. But I mean, what type of equipment do you, I mean, you're spending a lot out of your own pockets to do this efficiently now. I don't mean bare bones, to do it efficiently.
When I started back in 2016, and I had my own cell phone, they did provide me copies. I'd go in and I'd periodically get 10 or 15, but it's sometimes inevitably when I needed something, they were busy. So it got to a point it was more convenient just to make my own and just go from there. Over time, as we aged, arthritis and whatnot, and I was taking a look at my handwriting. And since I was complaining about judges' handwritings that we couldn't read on the bail orders, I figured it was time to pony up. I got my iPad. I got a program that allowed me to go in and be able to utilize the state forms as they were. And slow but sure, and then they started putting them out on the website, and we were able to download them and work with them, and I type all of that. So over time, just myself, because I wanted to put forward a more professional, and more importantly, I didn't want the defendant to be able to say that I couldn't read what they wrote and have that as a loophole.
And just to be clear, I'm not going to propose that we vote an amount of money. This is for me to, when I meet with the Chief Justice, to say, what do you think about providing your contractors with something to start them up, be it some kind of a startup package?
We talked about it, you put it as a bridge too far. You have to, in my view, you have to ask for something that's reasonable. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a computer. I don't use a computer. I use the police facilities. Copying, Mr. Leary does it himself. I find that police departments are very cooperative about letting me make my copies there. So I think that is, I want to keep any request that this committee makes reasonable. And I think people may nod their heads, but they're not going to believe that we have to provide cell phones or something. That's just operating equipment for everybody. But the big thing that should be on that list, mother heavens, is training. That's got to be, I mean, sorry.
Remember, we are independent contractors. We
You
bring
are.
our own tools to the job. And I agree with Representative Sytek. I think that's definitely more than a bridge. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 bridges too far, especially to equip that amount of people. But I echo what he said is training. And where the court was willing to go out and hire one person to train 15 magistrates, I think, or the bill that was put in, is that hire that same person and have them train the bail commissioners. And that means new bail commissioners that come in, they meet with that person that is designed to do the training, set it up and give them the basic training. Then they go out and shadow a bail commissioner actually doing the work out in the field. I think would be, miles ahead. And again, looking to the future, so that other people that would sit here before you would be appropriately, trained and have the respect, so to speak, of the office and not be treated as an afterthought. I think those are the important things. And by the training alone, I think it ups the professionalism of the group. You're fortunate that you have a huge professional group, but there's some too, like with every group, that could need a little bit more help in that area.
So in that vein, just so Representative Sitek doesn't have to bring it up again, we all agree that whatever we pass is going to require, and just as a side note, generally speaking, we wouldn't tell another branch of government what to do with their employees, but they're not their employees. So I feel very comfortable, since they are serving both the judicial, executive, we can, as the legislature, say what they need. So everyone agrees training should be part of onboarding, and at least annually or more often if the laws are changed that require it. Is that seem reasonable to everybody? Go ahead, Representative.
I was just gonna say, when it comes to the laptops and stuff, maybe this is something we put off depending on how, the rest of this conversation goes, but maybe it could be more of a reimbursement system instead of upfront providing people with the technology they need. That way, if people, don't have an iPad or a laptop or if it breaks, they're able to get one. I employ independent contractors and I give them mileage reimbursement and reimbursement for, costs that they spend to complete the job. I also was going to say that if we're looking into allowing them to, access criminal records and stuff like that, then maybe it does have to be a state issued laptop. So I think that's something we also need to think about.
I think that issue I'm going to address with the Chief Justice, and so to the two bail commissioners' presence point, if I was going to suggest that we fund some kind of a startup package, I agree that because it's such an ethereal thing, some people need it, some people don't. But if we talk to the Chief Justice and say, look, what do you think? What would be appropriate in your mind, even to your point, a reimbursement type of system that we could put seed money into start, that they could fund out of their budget when they ask for a new budget. So that'll just be part of the conversation I have with the court. I don't think it's something we'll necessarily try to mandate through legislation unless the court agrees to it. Representative Stone.
Thank you. I guess when I'm looking at the training aspect, I think we should consider if it's going to be maybe a mandated 4-hour block of training annually, because once they have the initial training, really it's more of a refresher course for any change of law. That should probably be done at least annually.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we need to prescribe the time amount that should be allocated to that, or we should leave that up to them.
I think we leave that up to the courts. I think that they know, at least as long as we mandate, we can use a descriptor, substantial, some type of descriptor to say that this training has to be actually not just, 5 minutes. I think we can massage that language out without putting an hour limit to it. Go ahead.
No, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
I would think that you might want to loop Commissioner Quinn in from the Department of Safety, because he's the one that signs off on the bottom line of all of the stuff doing with the NCIS,
I'm already meeting with the Attorney General, so he reports to him. So I
right.
think,
But the thing is, he's the one who's got to sign off on all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So he probably could answer the questions a lot easier and quicker for you, or send someone over that could, so that you could ask the questions that you needed.
good call. Okay. So back to the stand on focus. We agree on training. Did you have something? I saw you raise your hand for a second, then pull it back down. When I took away the hours, you put it back down? Yeah, okay. So we're going to mandate training, but we're not going to tell them how to do it. We're going to mandate that they have initial training and that they have annual training, or as the law changes. Go ahead, Representative.
I don't know whether it's RSA or court rule, but we do have an annual training or an annual refresher where we sit down, and that typically is an hour, maybe more. We have a rather free-flowing conversation. with our district court judge. It's typically held in October. And many times I've sat there thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I were listening to other courts? How come is our wisdom confined only to this forum? Nice for that just.
I think what we heard though is that it's really depending on where you are, if you get training, what the training contains. We heard someone who went to 2 different trainings within a week and they were different. So I think we needed it to be standardized across the state, and it needs to be mandatory, and someone needs to sign off that it occurred. So I think that we don't need to get into the weeds about what it contains. We just need to make sure that it happens and somebody signs off that it happened. Representative Muse.
It doesn't sound like there is any kind of certification process for this. So it's one thing to provide training, to make training available, and to even require people to take the training. The other big issue is how much of the training actually sinks in. And that has to do with the comprehensiveness and the effectiveness of the training itself. So, to me, if there was one thing that we might want to also think about, it would be some sort of basic competency assessment or test that somebody might take before they're just sort of thrown out there in this situation for the first time. And that would be my primary worry, because if you do the math, if we have 85 bail commissioners now, sounds like we're down 35 from where we were pre-COVID. So if we do some things that make it better and more attractive for people to be bail commissioners, one of the things we could be dealing with, in a perfect world, might be an influx of new applicants. So how do you do that? How do you ensure that people, who are new to the job can deliver a service that is reasonably consistent with what more experienced people might deliver? And I think that what I get a little bit worried when I hear about 4 hours of training and then somebody's making bail decisions who's never done it before. And I think that's kind of been where we are, and we've sort of found ways to make it work. But again, if we're talking about professionalizing this, and I think one of the ways that people get respected and they get treated like professionals is that they have consistent training and that there are consistent standards across the board that professionalize the occupation. So having some type of an assessment would be a good idea, I think too.
Yeah, we could, and how that looks in the language, I'm going to hold off on until we speak to the courts, but we could require that they, after their initial training, that they display competency in the knowledge that they've just received without making it too complicated or a big deal. Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Isn't it my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these individuals are appointed by the district court judge for where you serve, or no, it's done by AOC now?
It used to be by your local, your district court judge. It's now done by the administrative
AOC.
judge of the court.
Thank you.
It's done out of Granite Street somewhere.
Just a follow up. Since these positions are volunteer positions, and the courts obviously have a understanding of the individual's background, I think that needs to be in consideration when we're looking at going too far to professionalize something, that they are volunteers. These are basically a kind of a per diem rate that's relatively low in what you're demanding of them. I think we have to really balance that out and not overdo it with regulation at the same time.
I agree, but I also agree with Representative Muse that they should at least be able to display a competency before they hit the streets, so to say. And what that looks like, I'll leave to the courts to decide. That way we're not going too far as micromanaging a relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor. Go ahead, Representative Muse.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we shouldn't forget too is that although these folks are volunteers, the decisions that they make impact the freedom of individuals in the justice system. They're very, very important decisions.
Agreed. When we're talking about a decision about whether someone stays or goes, could have implications into their job, their family life, it, huge ramifications. So I see nothing wrong with making sure that the initial appointees can display a level of competency and knowledge of the law, and what that looks like would leave to the courts to decide. So, Representative Pratt.
I was a commissioner of safety for fire standards and training for 18 years. We always wrestled with the idea of how much training is beneficial and how much training stops the volunteers from coming in. And across the state of New Hampshire, we have some of the highest training level hours of any other state. And because of that, our volunteerism is dropping off because it's hovering around 200 hours to become a firefighter. And so a lot of firefighters just say, I don't have 200 hours.
Yeah, and it's
if
a
you
volunteer,
start going
you
down
know.
that road, you got to be very careful about how
Agreed.
much you ask of a person that's getting $40 every other time they go out.
I agree, and
Yeah.
thank you. That knowledge is valuable. And the firefighters, likewise, these are volunteer firefighters, and they're not getting paid for that training either, are they? Yeah. So we have to be cognizant of that too. Mandating many hours of training for someone who's not getting paid is indeed almost a punishment. So again, I go back to, let's leave to the court what they think, how much training they need. We just want to mandate that they have it, that it's uniform, and that before they take the role, they have a basic understanding of the role. Representative Satek.
Representative Muse stole by thunder that no matter what the training is or however, they are making real decisions concerning people's liberty.
Yes,
You can't underestimate that.
agreed.
Where it's there has to be, as part of this training, the laboratory, what I'm calling the laboratory, like a field training officer. You go out and you actually see this being done. There's just something about getting your hands into the dirt and seeing the process at work. It's more than ethereal. You're dealing with real people in a real situation. Just the feel you get for that you can't get in a classroom. That's got to be part of any training.
Agreed. And we can take police field training officers. They have to do tandem. Most departments now, you don't just hit the street. And I think the same should go, that there should be a period of shadowing. However, again, back to it's volunteer, and unless that you're going to split your $40 with your ride-along partner. But we can. Again, I really hesitate to micromanage what the court, how they do it. So we can make strong suggestions. Professor Scheer? Ah,
I was committed to not saying anything today, but as a law professor, I just can't resist. 2 points. I think this committee has got to decide whether they're going to treat bail commissioners like volunteers or like paid contractors. You know, if somebody's getting $50 for being a bail commissioner in a particular case, they're no longer volunteers. So I just caution the committee between using the term volunteer and also being aggressive, which I completely agree with, about these people getting paid the money they're due. But if they're getting paid that money, don't use the word volunteers. It'll just confuse the conversation with the court system. Just a language thing. Second, in thinking about training and thinking about the, shall we call it, decentralized organization of bail commissioners in the state, one of the recommendations that might be worth talking to the court about and being in legislation is to fund a part-time position in the court system for managing bail commissioners. I think that is the best model for pulling together all the different stuff, all the different and good stuff that everyone's been talking about today and yesterday. I think you know, when the conversation occurs with the court about bail commissioners, you know, they're going to say money, 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 money. You know, who's going to do? Yeah. Now we're going to add some more tasks to people who already have too many jobs. And I think that's a legitimate concern on the court's part. But, you know, I think if you bring this together and think about giving the court a part-time, I think it's only needed for part-time, a part-time position, bail commissioner coordinator, let's call it. I think that is a model that the court might well be very receptive to, and not make this a conversation where one party is saying, you know, you courts, you're falling down on your task as to bail commissioners, and the court's saying, we don't have the money to do all the things you want us to do. I think that could be a quickly spiral into a negative conversation. But if you talk about, you know, we really want to improve bail commissioners, here's our thought. What do you think of this?
Yeah,
That might be a better approach.
And I think that that was the approach I intended to take, but I really like that idea, that there does need to be somebody who is has eyes on this whole thing, because it is balkanized, and from one district to the next. I mean, it's hard for. I want to be able to call the court and say, how many bail commissioners are there, and someone to say this many as of today, and how many bails were done last year, this many as of right now. That should be, and to your point, I think a coordinator who can look up and maintain. And
The way I would put it, you know, in talking to people in business, when they assign projects to people in their business, what they were looking for, a phrase I've heard repeatedly, is, I want somebody who wakes up in the morning thinking about bail commissioners.
Yeah.
And we don't have that, and that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Professor. Does the committee agree with that idea that we should propose to the courts, and if they agree, try to fund a part-time position to be the bail commissioner coordinator, whatever they want to call it? It's their job. Representative Newman.
I intended to listen more than talk. I just
I've
wanna
heard that from
mention,
everybody.
since I did some training in the FAA,
Yeah.
and you have people that train and check
Mhm.
controllers and pilots and stuff like that. And I think that the really important part of that is, if you do have one individual like you're going to talk about, that they go and they do check rides on kind of like check rides on bail commissioners. And then you would have somebody that not only knew what was going on with the bail commissioners, they would also have an understanding of what was going on with the various courts, and how consistent the training is across the whole training program.
I'll bring that up in my conversation with the court. Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things we have to be very careful is, one, is the system broken, or does the system need to be kind of patched back together? I think it's a little bit of both. And what we're hearing is training, training, training. And the professor does bring up a good point. The more we go down this path of creating a position in the court, creating a revenue source to make sure they get paid, we are now opening up another branch of employees, and that's going to be a very, very slippery slope. So if we do create something in the court system that says, oh, these people are going to be in charge of the bail commissioners, we don't have anything like that to start. So who's going to say what this job is going to be? Who's going to be the one to actually create the job?
The court system has a human resources department, and I believe that they would probably have to write a job description, and then they would have to send it out to get a salary analysis. There's a whole huge process. That's why we stay away from the micromanagement. I'm going to suggest this, and I would hazard a guess that the court system, as long as we're willing to pay for it, would be happy to have it. So
Okay.
let's see what they say. Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How about would that fall under somebody's job description that's already working in the court system? Because it doesn't sound like a very time-consuming thing to keep track of that data.
It's my understanding that the courts right now are understaffed, And I don't believe that that's any form of an exaggeration. And based on our visit there, as you can see, it's a very busy business, and they are not at their staffing levels as it is. So if we were to tell them find some time for someone else, they're going to say sure, but it's going to take away from this, and it's just going to. Representative Pratt.
There's still a possibility that we're looking at making the courts work 6 days a week. Or is that a very expensive one we talked about before?
It's a very real possibility that we're going to discuss having at least one judge on the weekends to handle these. And we already know there's one doing emergency orders. So we're going to have that conversation. And I think for any of this, and I don't want to get too far down this road because it's
Right.
going to be another day, but
Yep.
if we're going to mandate a list of crimes that cannot be bailed by a bail commissioner, then we cannot do that without having somebody alternatively be able to hear within 24 hours, a judge to be able to hear it. So I think the two things are inextricably linked. And as we know, our friends in the Senate have kind of drawn that line, and we want at least these crimes. So I suggest that we say, okay, you can have the crimes, but you have to be able to have somebody there to hear these people so that they at least have an opportunity to get out. Because again, go back to presumed innocent.
One more follow-up.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Maybe that would be the person that would be overseeing the bail commissioners or that
Possibly.
night court or whatever it is.
Yeah, possibly. But we'll discuss that. Like I said, they have a human resources department. They're going to want to put their own process in place to try and figure out their time management. I'm just willing to say, are we willing to fund a part-time position and let them figure out how to deal with it? So I just want to be able, when I go to the court, say the subcommittee thinks that we would be able to vote to support such a thing if you are open to it. Representative Stone.
Thank you. So it's my understanding that they don't have someone currently that oversees any of the bail operations for commissioners, or someone who's at least charged with that responsibility within AOC?
I think probably very loosely, Professor Scheer.
The responsibility for the primary responsibility for bail commissioners is with the administrative judge for the district court system. That judge has a tremendous amount of responsibilities on their plate. And to Representative Reed's discussion, the very problem with bail commissioners in part has been there's nobody who wakes up in the morning thinking about bail commissioners. It's probably not a full-time job, but to organize consistent, repeated training, to develop a shadowing program, to recruit bail commissioners, I think that's a substantial job. And, I've known the last 3 consecutive administrative judges, and boy, they just don't have the time to do this in the way it needs to be done for.
What else is on their plate? That judge, just give the committee a feeling for what else that administrative judge has to oversee.
They've got 32 or 33 circuit court judges who, on a daily basis, create messes and run into problems. I have tenure at the law school, so I can say this, but they're like 33 teenage cats that the administrative judge is herding. They do stuff that they can't do. They need to be told to back off. They have to manage, the administrative judge has to manage the relationships between those judges and the clerks of court, and negotiate those relationships with the administrative office of the court, which is in charge of the clerks of court. They need to unwind the felonies first program and get ready to have probable cause hearings once again held in district court, which is a huge administrative burden. And that's just, and they have to do the budget work. This is it's important to bail commissioners. It's important to the system, but bail commissioners as a relative matter or a blip on their radar in terms of having time to focus on it?
So to your point, they're not waking up in the morning thinking about bail commissioners unless something bad happened overnight.
Something really bad.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure they ever wake up any morning during the year thinking about bail commissioners. So.
Thank you for that. And I think there should be somebody at the court who does wake up. And a good point was just raised. Recruiting bail commissioners, keeping track of how many, when they're leaving. Right now, it sounds like nobody is. And so you could have a wave disappear and no one would even know it until the police started calling saying, no one's answering our calls to bail people. So that's a very important topic to bring up with the court. And I think that with the support of the committee, we can discuss funding, and we will discuss that as well with finance. Okay, so we have training, we have $50 funding. We have the possibility of funding a position to oversee and manage the bail commissioner system. Anything else? What else am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing something. Representative Sidek? Yeah, paid. We're not going to dabble in mileage because we're going to up the rate. Yeah, indeed there is. I don't think we need to add any more.
We talked about swearing in, right?
Yep, we're going to look into that.
ID.
We've got the ID we agree on.
And the clearance for,
Moving forward or back.
Yeah.
And training consistency, I think those are all my remarks. Good.
Okay. So I think we can wrap up that portion of this discussion. A lot of it is contingent upon the reception we receive from the courts. I'm willing to mandate the courts do things to a certain limit, but only to the limit that they can do them. And we don't know that until we talk to them. Representative Muse, did you?
Yeah, one of the things we may want to do, because I know a lot of our conversations have been pretty wide ranging, and one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is if we're too ambitious with whatever legislation that we decide to put forward, will we be able to get it passed? Will the folks in the other body agree to it? So, I mean, one of the things to think about doing too is to, and maybe we can kind of think about this, but at some point when we're done with this, have some sort of prioritization around what really needs, what's essential to have going forward.
Mhm.
And then I think it's fine to say, and we also recommend, action on these things. And some of these things, the court may be able to do administratively, especially if we connect them to systemic issues that are causing problems in other areas. Because a lot of these things that we've identified just sort of tend to metastasize in other places.
I'm a little hesitant on that because we do have in statute that the bail commissioners receive training, and that doesn't seem to have taken quite. So I think we need to define that. But my intention was, we have, I believe, 4 or 5 bills that we've retained, and I think that what we do is we prioritize and we compartmentalize this into those different bills, so that we've got our main bill that has the things that just have to be fixed. And then we have the things that, we still think are really important, but if they get pushed to the wayside, the system still goes on and survives. And we fixed at least the minimum of what we could. But I feel like at this point in history, this body has dealt with this so many times that it's now time to take a real bite at just fixing it and stop trying to whittle around the edges, because it'll just be back, and you and I'll be here again next year, hopefully, and doing it again. And so let's just move on if we can, and hopefully get this all in a global fix. And I'm aware of the danger of being too ambitious. I have spoken to our counterparts, some of them on in the other chamber, And their concern still remains these list of crimes. So I feel like as long as we get that in there, everything else should be okay, as long as we can come up with the money. So let's shoot high, aim for the stars, and see where we end up. I don't think anyone's willing to let the thing just go away based on, that. So again, we still have hurdles. We still have to get the courts to agree. So barring that, the legislation might shrink.
Jerry,
Um,
Jerry, I had one.
Representative Pratt.
We talked the other day about bail, and I know that it used to be for a more serious crime, you actually paid more money for the bail, and it sounded like that went away. I don't understand how all that is.
Yeah. So it's my understanding that, because I wasn't part of that in 2018, a large contingent of the people who are arrested and make up the majority of this have no money. They just don't. So, you could set $1,000 bail, you could set $100 bail. They're not going to have it. So what happens is they end up staying incarcerated just based on the mere fact that they're poor. And that's not what the justice system was designed to do. Cash bail still exists and can be used in egregious cases and where someone actually has money. So if you have a corporation, somebody gets involved in a big white collar crime thing, you can set $1 million bail, and that would hurt them to lose it. So that would ensure that they come. But if you set a bail of $1,000 to a homeless person, you've just incarcerated. You might as well have just said hold them.
Well,
So-
just to
Okay.
play devil's advocate on that.
Oh, absolutely.
A person that has nothing is more likely probably to flee the state if they were looking at time.
I agree, and that's still available to hold flight risks. They just have to show why they would be a flight risk. And someone without a car can't fly too far.
Right.
That's actually one of the things we're going to discuss next week. Is the second part. We've talked about the dangerousness. We're going to touch on flight risk, because those are the two key aspects of why we have bail. One, are they a danger to public if they're let out? Two, are they a risk of flight? And we haven't even talked about flight, so that we're going to talk about that next week. Anyone else have anything? Let's see what we're going to take 15 minutes, and we're going to come back, and if there's anything else we can touch on today, we will. If not, we'll wrap up. Calling the meeting back to order. So we've talked about a great bit today. I think we've made some good progress as far as our structure of what we're going to discuss with the courts. I've just been informed that it's likely that we'll have a meeting with the Chief Justice sometime the first week of October. Myself and Representative Gathright and probably Representative Rhodes and another representative that Representative Gathright chooses. Representative Muse is going to be gone, unfortunately, but we'll sort out the logistics of that. But it looks like it's going to be the first week in October. One thing I want to address for us to think about, this is back to homework again. If you've looked online, like we were talking about yesterday, to see all these forms they have to put out, the bill commissioner, where he went, he gave me a copy of all of them that I'm going to ask to be copied and put in everybody's box next week. So you'll have them when you come back. One thing I wanted to address, though, before we leave for the day, and I'd like everyone to think about over the next week, is that we've talked a lot about these crimes, and we've talked about, the felony and the seriousness of these crimes. But what we haven't addressed, I think, and we need to at least think about, the majority of the problems, for example, the city of Manchester and Nashua are having, aren't these crimes. They're nuisance type crimes. They're picking up people for trespass, for disorderly person, and they're bailing them out on personal recognizance, and they're picking them up a few hours later or the next day. And it's happening, 3 and 4 times, sometimes over a weekend with the same person. I'd like everyone on the committee to think about, how we could tackle that issue, keeping in mind the principle that we don't want to hold people because they're poor or mentally ill, but also taking that burden off the local communities of same people committing the same nuisance crime over and over a short period of time. Perhaps look at it through the lens of, okay, you get picked up the second time that weekend. Perhaps we need to look at directing, not necessarily to be held in a jail, but maybe an evaluation to see what's going on with them. Something's happening, be it mental health, be it substance. Let's look at how we can direct those people to get the services they need rather than just put them in the jail for the weekend. That way we're helping both the community and the individual who's having these obvious issues that they have to keep getting picked up. Any thoughts on that? Representative Muse?
Yeah, from a homework perspective, one of the things that's always interesting as a legislator is typically for almost any issue that you want to consider, at some point or another, there's been a commission or a committee that's been appointed to study the issue. So back in 2022, the governor appointed an advisory commission on mental illness and the corrections system. And their full report and recommendations are available, and I have those. And they address a lot of the things that I think we've heard consistently about in testimony, some of the systemic issues. So it's a homeless person who might be arrested for shoplifting at Market Basket who is out on PR bail, and then an hour later, the same officer is rearresting them again at Market Basket for shoplifting. So there are people who commit small offenses over and over and over again. And there are a substantial number of people like that in our county jails. So the issue is how do we sort of get out of this cycle where the criminal justice system, for better or worse, seems to be warehousing people who have deeper problems. So this commission has actually dove into that a bit. They do have recommendations. So what I'll do is I'll send their final report to the members of the committee.
Agreed. That is a very excellent idea. So take a look at that and then put your own thoughts towards what you see in that report and what you think about the issue. I encourage also the members of the subcommittee to reach out to your local police chiefs and get their input and what they're dealing with on a local basis daily, and maybe even take a trip to your local circuit court and just have a look at what's going on there. Talk to some people, come back to the committee with what you find, and we'd like to incorporate as much of that as we can I mean, we've heard from the folks here that come here, but while we're here talking about it, real life's going on out there. And we want to find out what our local people are going through too. So take a look at the report David's going to circulate. Put a thought to how these for lack of a better term, nuisance crimes that are really what are causing this consternation with the citizens in the police, with the repeat offenders. It's generally not the first degree assaults and the attempted murders. It's the shoplifting, it's the trespass, it's the disorderly person. And we need to look at a way to break the cycle of just putting them in jail until they get back out again and do the same thing. We need to look at focusing towards, okay, we're going to get them off the street, but we're not just going to use David's term, warehouse them. We're going to see if we can look at where they need to get these services and connect them with these services. And if after having had these services they continue, then it becomes a criminal issue. But until then, let's see if it's not first a mental health or substance issue that we can actually address with resources that are out there, even if it's just connecting them with a private entity that provides these services in the community. So that's really all I would ask of you over the next week until we meet again. Have a care to that. Visit your chiefs if you have time, and see what's going on in your local communities. Anyone have anything else before we close for the day? Seeing none, closing the public hearing until next Thursday.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 o'clock. I am going to open up our subcommittee. I think this is a hearing. I'm not exactly sure what to call it. Work session for our two retained bills. The first one we are going to hear is House Bill 593 FN, and we are going to invite Representative McGuire to just say a few words before we make any decisions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom, so I'm the prime sponsor of this bill. I'm here to request that you find it interim study. So if you're not familiar with that, interim study is a motion applicable to second-year bills, and because this was retained, it's now a second-year bill, and it's also known as death with dignity. So it has the effect of somewhat of the effect of ITL. The bill would not become law, but on the other hand, the subject matter would still be open in the sense that if a bill came from the Senate, for example, or some other bill in the House was somehow related, it could still be discussed. So there's actually been, over the summer, a fair amount of work going on with this bill. You may recall that we had some difficulty with the judiciary. Well, we've had many meetings with the judiciary. We have new language that they're happy with, et cetera. And so I could have come to you today with like another 15-page amendment or something like that, but I decided not to do that. And I'll see if I can work through the process and get that in as another bill, in another way. And that's my plan. And if not, I'll wait another year. But rather than try to rework this bill, please just find it interim study. Thank you.
Representative Newman, you have a question?
Yeah, I have just a question because, I mean, you told the process of an interim study. So what is it in the House rules that prevents you from just submitting it as a different bill?
Yeah, thank you for the question. House Rule 36E says that if a bill is retained or found ITL in the first year, right, it cannot be reintroduced.
Okay.
So in order to reintroduce this, and my plan is I'm actually going to be breaking it up into 3 different bills, so it's a little more manageable. But I have to go to the Rules Committee. So I'm on the agenda for the Rules Committee on October 10th. To talk about this.
Thank you for the explanation.
Does anybody else have any questions for Representative McGuire? Okay, so before we take this this vote, I just would like to say real quick that I cannot take credit for the work that is in front of me. This was given to me by somebody who works a lot harder than I do. And I do have the history of forfeiture bills over the last couple of years. Some of them have actually been signed into law, but will not be going into effect, or actually just went into effect. A lot of them are either getting killed on the House floor or they're not making it quite through the Senate. And I have this here. I'm happy to share this with anybody who wants to take a look at it. In addition to that, I also made a couple of phone calls about this legislation, and I did talk with Representative McGuire as well. And, when we looked through this and we met the first time, and most of you would remember, we did have Representative Lynn here, and we talked about this being so broad. Does it all belong in criminal justice? And that was one of the biggest problems that we had. So basically where we are now is, it is my understanding, and with the conversations I've had with Representative, that it's going to be broken up into different sections at the leadership level, and this will not all be coming to criminal justice, at least not the first time around. Some of it may be gone to transportation, some of it may be gone to judiciary. It's not for me to decide where it goes. I just know that it doesn't all necessarily belong in this committee. We're not, the subject matters to be discussing those things. So with that being said, who wants to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
What is your motion?
Interim study, please.
Fantastic. Do we have a second? Seconded by Representative Reed. I don't have a list here to know who's first to vote. Does it really matter?
No.
Okay. Representative Guthrie, are you on the subcommittee? You're not? Okay, Bradley's not here. Okay. All right, we'll start with Representative Reed.
I vote yes.
Representative Newman votes yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
The chair votes yes. 2, 3, 4, 5 yes, 0 no. Motion passes. All right, with that, we will close the work session for House Bill 5. What is it? Yeah. What is this bill number? Help me out here. We are closing the work session for House Bill 593 FN. Oh. Do we actually have to wait until 1:30 to open the next one? Oh my God. So they both weren't just scheduled at 1 o'clock?
This, or do you want me to deliver it to somebody?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 1:30 and the cafeteria only has one person working, and we do have a member that is just coming back upstairs. So we are going to open this and just go into a recess for just a few minutes until he's able to join us. So please bear with us a couple minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to reopen the work session for House Bill 113. And Representative Abbott is here, who is the main sponsor. Representative, did you want to talk to us?
Yes, the only thing I don't have anything really to add to the testimony I had presented at the public hearing. The only thing I think that that this bill does is it does eliminate the state requirements for physical exams. It does not limit any local agency from having physical requirements. And I think what the situation we find ourselves in today, not only on the state level, but on the national level, is the difficulty in recruiting and retaining police officers. And I think that this should be something that's under local control and not mandated by the state. We are the only state that mandates physical requirements for police officers. And we also makes it very difficult for communities like I represent, which are small towns, in recruiting and retaining police officers. So this is why I put the bill in, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. So I'm going to go ahead and say a few things. One is I have had extensive conversations with Director Skippa, and we actually talked about many different options. And one of the things that was discussed was the fact of this being in local control. And one of the concerns that I had, and after I think about 45 minutes of, he and I having just a conversation, one of the things that I was concerned about with that was some towns using this in a negative way. So in other words, if they had an officer that for whatever reason they wanted to get rid of, and it's unfortunate that I do know of some examples that I could give, but I certainly will not do that. That could have been changed. They could have said, oh, we're not going to require it anymore because, we're having trouble recruiting or retaining or whatever the reason will be. And then all of a sudden, nope, we're going to, we have so-and-so that we think is going to have difficulties and we're going to switch it. And I was really nervous about a pendulum. I didn't want it just going back and forth and being able to change at the will of a police chief or the town selectman. And we did come up with a solution to that. However, that solution just, we just kept on going down this rabbit hole of every time we turned around, there was another obstacle that just wasn't going to be solved with what we were trying to solve. So I have a lot more to add, but that is at least what I want to say about the local control thing. And I did ask Brad, he's done a lot of work for all of us. And I did ask him if he would please pull up what other states around us do in New England. I also had him look at what is required to become a police officer in the state of New Hampshire versus other states around us. And I actually had him go even a little bit deeper than that and pull up what are the standards for the military and federal positions. And one of the things I know for a fact, my husband is a railroad engineer. I should say he's a railroad locomotive engineer. And he is required every year to have a physical. He has to have a hearing test. He has to have a sleep apnea test. Many that he has to do. That is a requirement of his job, along with random drug testing at will. Used to be every year. I do believe they went back to the federal standard, which is every 3 years. And I do know that pilots also have requirements that they have to do. And they also have a mandatory retirement age that I will add, right? So I don't know. I think Brad sent this to everybody. If you didn't get it, I do have a copy and you're all welcome to look at it. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Is there anybody else that has anything to say? Representative Wheeler.
I do think that having standards for our police officers, physical standards, is quite important. And as was talked about at lunch between Representative Muse and myself and Representative Newman and Murphy, New Hampshire has actually been congratulated and given as an example in other states for our physical fitness requirements. And I would say that getting rid of them would put the public safety in jeopardy. If we have people who can't do the job of a police officer being able to catch a perp if they're running away, or any of the very physical tasks that are needed when you're a police officer, then that puts our communities at risk. It just opens up the door for criminals to be able to know, well, this town's got some cops that are down and dirty, and we can do whatever we want here. And I think it's important that we have physical fitness requirements so that our cops are doing the job right and well, and that they're fit and able to do it. And I have seen that in our police officers here in New Hampshire, and think it's important to maintain this. So whenever you're ready, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Thank you, Representative Wheeler. Hold on a minute. I think we have some other people that have something to say. This is being recorded. You do know that. Representative Stu.
Is that me?
Oh.
I'm up? Okay. I'm for repealing this bill, and I'll tell you why. I understand the concern about standards and being able to catch a perp. However, if you look at these standards, a 59-year-old police officer has to do the 1.5 mile run. I think it's 5 seconds slower than an 18-year-old female. So when we start differentiating genders and ages, and there are different standards for each one, how does that make someone able to catch a perp or be able to do the job better if they don't have to run as fast when they get older, or if they're a different gender? In addition, we're losing experienced officers. Usually those guys that have 25 years, 30 years on, they're police chiefs, they're captains. They're not out there chasing people, but they have 30 years experience, and we're going to lose that because they can't pass a physical agility test. You're not paid to do this, to train. You're not paid to keep in shape. And if you get hurt while you're out there training for your test, guess what? You're out of a job, because workman's comp is not going to cover you. New Hampshire is the only state that requires this every 3 years. In addition, we don't require our firefighters to do it or our EMS people to do it, just our police officers. I don't think this should be tied to someone's certification. I know that most towns have a physical agility requirement that's incentive-based, if you want to take it. I know in the towns that I've worked in, and just for some background, I've worked in law enforcement for 30 years. However, I'm not a chief. But they will pay you to pass it every 3 years, and a lot of guys take that advantage. It's extra money. They'll keep in shape, and I know a lot of guys will still keep in shape just for that incentive base that each town provides. I don't think tying it to your certification, and if you miss a push-up by 1 or you miss the run by 10 seconds, you're out of a job. This law went into effect, I think it was 2001. I might be wrong on the date, but prior to that, we did fine. For however long police officers existed before 2001, we had no issues with them being in shape. We had no issues with them getting hurt extra or catching perps. We operated prior to that. So I think it's about time we repeal this. The standard will stay in place for recruitment when you first get hired, to get in the academy and to get out of the academy. But after that, tying it to your certification, I don't think is the way we should be doing it. That's it. Thank you.
Representative Murphy, I'm sorry.
Close enough. Thank you. I agree with some of Representative Stone's points. The difference I have an opinion is around whether it's appropriate to make this decision legislatively or to have police standards and training reassess their current requirements. And I feel like that's the appropriate place for this, fully recognizing that any of us, as we get older, are not going to be as physically fit, maybe as maybe with some rare exceptions, as we were when we were 18 or 19. But if I remember correctly, some of the testimony that we had about concern was about liability too, whether a partner wasn't necessarily as in good physical shape, whether there would be liability potential liability for departments if a police officer, an incident involving a police officer that wasn't as physically fit and that it impacted the public. I support a change if that's deemed appropriate, but I think that the members should be the people doing this with the department, and I would fully recognizing we are having staffing challenges within the PD. I think we're seeing that across the board in many positions. I know that right now we only require this every 3 years, and we heard from some officers who had been given there was some kind of plan in place for them to have more time to come into compliance. So I think there are exceptions. I think there are ways to before an officer is no longer certified, there are things in place, and I feel that the place for this to happen is actually with police standards and training, and not for us to legislatively decide that we would not have that this to remove this from RSA.
Thank you, Representative. Representative, him first?
Yeah.
Okay. Representative Muse?
To Representative Murphy's point, we did have a really good, robust discussion during the hearing process and the executive session around possible alternatives. So I think one of the things we learned from police standards and training is that the way that they currently do it, that particular methodology is a couple of decades old, and they're looking at changing it. One of the things that I suggested as a way of losing some of those good officers who basically can't meet the physical standards anymore was creating some type of an alternative, a wellness program, for example, that they could participate in, and potentially not, and potentially not lose their certification. But when we start to get into things like that, what we start to get into is sort of what I think we should avoid, which is the legislature micromanaging, the agencies. And I do think that there are people in police standards and training who are they're aware of the fact that the legislature has told them that we have to have these standards, but to a large extent, I mean, we've left it up to them to decide what the standard should be. So if the standards aren't working, if we're losing people because of it, I think that's a wake-up call for police standards and training to really take a good look at those standards. but I don't necessarily think it's a wake-up call for the legislature to get rid of them, especially not when even the police themselves who testified. So it's always unusual for the Chiefs of Police Association to come and testify on a bill and be neutral about it. And the reason they were neutral about it is, well, there was some disagreement even among the chiefs about whether or not repeal was a good idea. So, what I would say is it might be a better idea to see what police standards and training can do to continue to be in contact with them. But in terms of repealing the existing law, I think we should give it a little bit more time to play out and time for those discussions to play out.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Tenzar?
Thank you. I'm not recommending this at all, but if you really want to measure physical fitness, it should be tested every 6 months. I mean, 3 years just seems arbitrary, and you could get out of shape for 2.5 years and really bust your butt to get in shape. So these quote unquote fat cop, you could be a fat cop for 2.5 years, get in shape, pass the test, and be a fat cop again. That's all I'd like to add.
You guys are killing me. Wait, hold on one second, Representative Muse. Representative Wheeler.
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate what my friend Representative Mannion talked about in his opposition to this. What I would say is I agree that there is a problem with retention and staffing issues within the police, within the industry of police. But I don't know if the data bears out that it is the standards that is causing there to be a lack of staffing shortages. I think those staffing shortages come more from a lack of adequate pay in a world where the cost of living has increased so greatly over these last 4 or 6 years. And I would say that us as a state living up to our obligation and trying to adequately pay people more and looking into other things, I'd be happy to look into how we could retain employees, state employees, including our police officers, in a more humane and just way, paying them adequately. But I don't know if getting rid of the standards that has made New Hampshire police officers solid and secure over these last 22 years since 2001 is the way to get that done. I think that lowers the standard, lowers the bar of where our police officers are at, which may, yes, in turn get us more people in that job. But that lowers the standard, and I think that it's important, especially for people who are enforcing justice on the streets, to have a high standard for those. And I think New Hampshire should be proud that we have that high standard right now. I would agree with Representative Tenzar that I think the 3-year number is an arbitrary one that is trying to play both sides. But I would also agree with Representative Muse that that should be up to police standards and training, and we shouldn't be micromanaging it here. I think this just opens up a can of worms, repealing this, that it wouldn't be beneficial for the legislature to engage in, and I think that, and I apologize for jumping the gun with my motion earlier. I was just really wanted to get out of here, but I really appreciate this debate as well. So I would just say, like, yes, if we want to work on retention, I'd be happy to work on retention with you, but I don't think that lowering the standard for our police officers and the physical fitness requirements they have is the way to do that.
Thank you, Representative. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go on the record saying that this doesn't affect me either way, whether it passes or it's repealed, just so it doesn't affect my position. So I just want to go on the record saying that.
Thank you. Representative Muse?
I think I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, so one of the things that I would like to point out that I think is very important for everybody to understand is that the Police Standards and Training Academy does have the ability to change some of these rules. And I also know that they are allowed to make reasonable accommodations also for officers. I do know that you know, it has right here in what I have, it says any officer who's unable to obtain the medical clearance shall have his or her certification placed in probationary status for a period of 6 months, which shall be extended by the council if good cause is defined, and then it continues to go on. So I do know that, you know, in the event that the officer is not able to, for whatever reason, you know, pass that test at that time, they do have they are able to go back and try again. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's like a couple of years. Like it doesn't just stop. And I could be wrong, but I don't see anybody shaking their head at me. So I think I might be okay. And the other thing that I think everybody here has kind of mentioned, but I know Representative Muse definitely did, is that this was a really healthy conversation we had in here. And it also was incredibly healthy when the officers themselves were all here testifying. And the problem that I'm having is that every single person I talk to, for every 2 people I talk to, they're split. They are split. Nobody seems to be able to just have the solution to the problem, even if there is a problem. And additionally, I do know that the Chiefs Association did send out a survey, and that came back split, and they had a very low return rate. So, you know, they're not even able to make a decision. So without them being able to make a decision, I don't really see that it's our position to make it for them. I think that may be insulting. So with that being said, does anybody else have anything to say? Yes, you may.
Thank you. I understand that the decision was made in 2001 by the legislature to make this a law. So we did get involved in it, and we did make the decision to have it every 3 years. So
Maybe they screwed up. Representative Wheeler.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to ITL HB 113, or recommend an ITL motion of 113 to the full committee.
Representative Wheeler has made a motion of ITL. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Representative Wheeler, would you like to call a roll? You want to just go around the table?
Sure. Representative Murphy?
Yes.
Representative Wheeler votes yes. Representative Tenzar?
No.
Representative Mannion?
no.
Representative Muse?
Yes.
Chair Rhodes?
Chair votes yes.
Okay. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 2.
So
Right,
the motion to
motion
ITL is passed 4-2. And with that, we will close the work session for House Bill 113. Thank you, everybody. Once again, nice discussion. Go home.
I know, I really took, I was like, oh.